I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal, the show where celebrities share stories about the foods they love most, and we dig into the history, culture, or science of those meals with experts from around the world. Today on the program, Hrishikesh, Hirway.
Try to understand, this is the only chance I've got. The life we could have had, I can still hold it in my thoughts.
Hrishi hosts and produces many podcasts, including my favorite food podcast of all time, Home Cooking, co-hosted with cookbook author and past Your Last Meal guest, Samin Nosrat. He also created the excellent music podcast Song Exploder that was made into a Netflix show. And Hrishi's a musician. His new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. You can catch him on tour starting next week. Hrishikesh is a cookie man. To say that Hrishi loves cookies is like saying Garfield likes lasagna. Like saying that Alf likes eating cats. Can you tell what decade I grew up in? So I couldn't be more excited to tell you who I talked to later in the episode. Lara MacLean, the puppeteer who bakes Cookie Monster's cookies for Sesame Street. But before we get to that, let's hop into my conversation with Hrishikesh Hirway.
Try to understand, this is the only chance I've got.
I hate to start this out on a negative note and call you names, but you are a cookie monster.
That's fair. I can take that.
We know about Cookie Monsters here at PBS. I am curious where your love of cookies began. What did you love when you were a kid, and how has your love of cookies evolved into your taste today?
I definitely have a different relationship to chocolate chip cookies now than I did as a kid, which is not to say that I didn't love them as a kid. I absolutely did. But I think, as an adult, one of the sad truths of adulthood is you have to make choices. You have to decide what's important to you. You have to decide what you want to be when you grow up. And for me, I decided I wanted to be someone who loved cookies above other desserts.
You had to make that choice.
Yeah. I think for me, chocolate chip cookies started with my next door neighbor, Mrs. Teal. When I was growing up in Peabody, Massachusetts, we lived next door to the Teal family, who were incredibly kind. And Mrs. Teal in particular, she befriended my mom. And I had so many formative experiences at their house. We had Thanksgiving for the very first time, or at least I had Thanksgiving for the very first time when they hosted us. But one of the things that I also had for the first time was a homemade chocolate chip cookie that she had baked. And I remember she sent us home with some one time in a jar. It had like red hearts on the jar. And we just kept that jar forever. And that became our de facto cookie jar, even when they were cookies from the store. But I'd never had a cookie that was warm before.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was the inciting moment.
I love how you remember the moment and the jar even.
Yeah.
Because at home, my mom never baked, so all our cookies came from a package. And so it was probably a long time till I had a warm one as well.
Yeah. I don't know that we even bought cookies from the store at that point. I must have been maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I don't remember cookies really being part of the rotation. But I think when I said I really like this, we slowly started to bring them into the house. And then really like all my bad habits really emerge around cookies, because then I would sneak, I would get to have like one or two, but I knew where they were kept. And so then I would like sneak in and take another one. Or sometimes when I would sneak, I would open up the bag and take one from the back of the container.
Yes. Good strategy.
So if you slid it open, it still looked like the same number of cookies.
That's like the kid equivalent of refilling your parents' liquor bottles with water.
Yes. Yeah. And not having any inclination towards drinking. This was my vice instead.
This was your drug of choice. When did you decide to start making your own cookies?
I really began my own cookie journey shortly before the pandemic. I was deep in it when the pandemic started. Having already at that point started to define my identity around my love of chocolate chip cookies,
yes.
At least a little bit. I took some inspiration from I would say, some of the most annoying fans of consumables in the world, wine people. Yeah, I was like, let's talk about the notes. Let's use adjectives that make no sense to anybody else.
Cookies with notes of leather and
right.
Mrs. Teal.
The base of it really was I wanted to be able to speak about cookies with a level of knowledge beyond just being a fan, just being able to say it was delicious or something like that. I wanted to understand. I'd spent so long making my podcast Song Exploder, where the thesis was, if you understand what's going on with this piece of art, with this piece of creativity, and you know what the backstory is and you know how it was made, your appreciation of it is only going to deepen. I wanted to conduct that same experiment on myself, but with cookies instead. And I had actually done a story on stage for this show, Pop-Up Magazine.
I forgot about that. I loved that. I completely forgot about Pop-Up Magazine.
Pop-Up Magazine was so cool, right?
It was so good. Yes. I forgot about that.
And people would tell stories and there would be music and visuals accompanying it. And for my story that I did, it was called Cookie Exploder. I interviewed the chef who made my favorite cookie in Los Angeles and tried to figure out what made it so amazing. And then it ended up being also a story about my dad and my relationship. My dad's a food scientist, and I shared the cookie with him.
Rishi's favorite cookie in Los Angeles was the mocha fudge cookie made by Crumpets Bake Shop, but it appears they closed last year. Let's all pour some milk out and grieve for the cookie I'll never get to try.
That was kind of the first part of trying to apply this idea of getting closer to cookies to understand them better. And so then I was like, well, if I'm really going to try and learn what makes a cookie great, I should probably also try and bake them myself. And not just, with a mix or something like that. Really go for it, which was hard for me because I'm terrible with recipes.
What was the first cookie that you started focusing on?
I flew too close to the sun. I wasn't ready at all. I was watching the Great British Bake Off and I started to think about what would my signature be, and I had some idea and craving for a chocolate mint chocolate cookie, like a cross between a chocolate chip cookie and a Girl Scout Thin Mint.
I like this idea.
I like the idea too, and I definitely did not have the skills to pull it off or even close. Yeah. That was, I remember, one of the first cookies that I tried to make on my own, and I was just riffing. I looked at a chocolate chip cookie recipe and I was like, I'll just take some cocoa powder and add, and it came out this very, very flat, oily disc. It wasn't good.
I started my interview with Hrishikesh by calling him a cookie monster. And now we're going to talk about the Cookie Monster from Sesame Street. Cookie Monster was there from the beginning, on the premiere season of Sesame Street in 1969, cramming cookies into his mouth, crumbs flying everywhere. But
the cookies were not very good.
That's Lara MacLean. She's been a puppet wrangler for the Jim Henson Company and Sesame Workshop for more than 30 years.
A lot of the times they would spray paint rice cakes, and that kind of annoyed me because when they break apart, they're white on the inside. And to me, as a kid growing up and being obsessed, I always wanted everything to be real. And so I knew that wasn't looking real for the kids at home. And also, if the shape was of a rice cake, that doesn't really look like a cookie either.
About 15 years ago, Lara took it upon herself to make Cookie Monster a better cookie, a more realistic looking cookie.
I remember it was a weekend and I was just really, really frustrated with the cookies. And actually they were getting some cookies shipped by someone who was making them in Florida. And they weren't even very good. They weren't breaking well. And I decided that I was going to go to the grocery store and just do some R&D on my own that weekend. And I bought lots of different grains and things like that. And I came back to my, at the time, very, very small apartment kitchen with one of those half stoves. Anyway, I just kept trying out different things. It was mostly pancake mix, puffed rice, grape nuts. And if you just cooked that together with water, you would get something kind of white And so, cookies and I know you know a lot about food, cookies with the brown sugar and molasses in them, that's where that brown color comes from. And so I had to kind of imitate that color. And so I used instant coffee in the water that I used to get that brown color. The problem with making Cookie Monster's cookies is normal cookies, the reason why they break so well is because they have fat in them, right? They have the butter, and that's what makes them break and brittle. And I am not allowed to use anything like that because it cannot hurt Cookie Monster's fur or his lovely black interior of his mouth. It needs to be clean every time so we can do take after take after take. So that's what was very difficult. And I did have some failures, definitely had some failures with these cookies where they just turn hard as rocks. So that's the trick, making it kind of an aerated cookie so that they will break. I have one here. Kind of the back, you can kind of see some air holes. And then the front, the chocolate, obviously we can't use real chocolate. So that is hot glue. You can buy any color hot glue online. If you just use your hot glue gun and you put your chips on, it would be very, very shiny and that would kind of look wrong. So I either do a little bit of matte spray or if I'm good with my timing, I can just kind of smear it with my thumb and it will dull up.
Lara has been baking Cookie Monster's cookies ever since, in addition to her other duties.
I wear a lot of different hats. I have to be on set whenever we're filming. So I'm reading the scripts in advance, making sure we have all the puppets and props and costumes ready to go, getting those things to wherever we're shooting, making sure that they're all looking good, in working order. I was obsessed as a child watching Sesame Street and the Muppet Show. I really like puppeteering as well. Yeah. And I do get to do some assisting puppeteering now and then, which keeps me going.
So are you a baker in general? Because I feel like the science of all of this is really important because you're trying to get a texture. It has nothing to do with flavor, but you're using real food.
Right. I'm a little bit of a baker, and I did some time at a culinary school, ICE, Institute for Culinary Education, years and years and years ago when I guess it was like after 9/11. I was like, what am I going to do? And they had like a work study program, and I did like 1,200 hours there.
Wow.
Not in baking, but just in the culinary program in general. The reason why I was doing it was like after 9/11, there wasn't much puppet stuff going on. And then suddenly puppet stuff came back and I was like, okay, well, thanks very much. They gave me like a certificate that says I completed that program, but not with a degree or anything like that. I still have it up in my kitchen acting like I have a degree. And so I learned a lot there, I guess.
I love that you have this 1,200 hours and the certificate from cooking school, and your cookies probably have more exposure than most people in the world, but they're probably the least tasty. It's just kind of a funny,
right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Sometimes people have eaten them or come close to ingesting them. And as long as they don't get near the hot glue, they'll live, but it's not very tasty. It tastes a lot like a dog treat. There have been some famous people that have eaten the cookie. There was the one time my assignment was to make a very large cookie for Cookie Monster and Adam Sandler to eat at the same time. And I really wanted to tell him in advance that it wasn't going to taste good. It was going to be fine because it was just a plain cookie. There was no chocolate chips on it. And so he did the great take. And then at the end, when they said cut, he just like,
That's why they make the big bucks. Sometimes they have to sacrifice. On my first day working at Cascade PBS 3 years ago, I sat in the lobby waiting for someone from HR to come and get me, and there were 3 TV screens over the receptionist, each playing a different PBS show. There was a black and white Julia Child cooking on one screen, and Sesame Street was on another. And I started tearing up. I couldn't believe I was getting to work at a place connected to my favorite childhood shows. And it was a very similar feeling getting to talk to Lara. After the break, what recipe will be your legacy when you pass away? Rishi talks about his mom's legendary mango pie. I want to talk about your parents. They both immigrated from India. And like a lot of immigrants, they weaved their food culture into American holidays. So can you talk about your mom's Thanksgiving mango pie, which has become, it's left your family at this point and entered into the zeitgeist?
Thank you. I hope that's true. That would be so nice.
It's entered my zeitgeist.
Really? Have you made mango pie?
I haven't made it, but just to jump ahead, we'll get to this. I've had the flavor at Salt and Straw. Amazing. And I read Samin's piece in the New York Times when the recipe was released, but I haven't made it yet.
Wow. Okay. Well, the ice cream is so good. The pie is also really good.
Good.
I love that it exists in these other forms and I don't have to feel like one is a compromise. Mm-hmm. But yeah, let me start at the beginning. So as I mentioned, actually, Mrs. Teal had us over for our very first American Thanksgiving. My parents used to tell the story that was like my first attempt at wordplay or something like that. And I said to Mrs. Teal, well, now you have some real Indians for your Thanksgiving. Something like that. And after we came home, I asked my parents, I was like, why don't we ever have Thanksgiving here? And so that's how it started. We started doing Thanksgiving at our house with just our families. Potlucks were such a big part of my immigrant Indian culture. All of the Indian families would always get together for these potlucks, like quite regularly. Mm-hmm. There were maybe 20 or 30 families. And so every month or maybe even like every couple weeks on a Saturday, we'd go to somebody's house to celebrate something, and it would always be a big potluck. So with that in the background, when my family started thinking about hosting Thanksgiving, it automatically turned into a potluck where, it was going to be 14 families coming over to our house. It really quickly evolved into just being a sort of Thanksgiving thing, into being a full Indian meal, sticking to the real Thanksgiving tradition of stuff yourself.
Yeah.
But we were just including Indian things as well. And along the way, my mom introduced this Thanksgiving mango pie. She sort of looked at, I think, like the pumpkin pie and started making this, and it was a huge hit right away.
Can you go through the ingredients? Because the mango gives the Indian kind of taste to it, but the rest is very American. Yeah.
The star of the show is this mango pulp that you could get at the Indian grocery store, this Alfonso mango, which is the sweetest mango in pulp form. But then she would mix it with Cool Whip, with Philadelphia cream cheese and sugar. And she would either use gelatin or she would make a vegetarian version with agar-agar and then pour it into like a Keebler graham cracker crust. So it really was like an American format, but with this Indian flavor as the kind of hero flavor.
Your mom passed away. I'm so sorry. I know it's been almost 6 years now. And your good friend, who a lot of people know listening to this show, Samin Nosrat, wrote about this recipe for the New York Times. And I reread the big head note today. I'd forgotten about this. From the start, she's just trying to chef up this recipe. She Keebler crust. No, I'm making my own. I'm making my own whipped cream. She just keeps trying to change things, but as she's trying to make it, it's not turning out right. And it sounds like she kind of had to go back and listen to you and make it the way that it was supposed to be. And she talks about, I'm going to read a quote here. She says, I asked Hirway whether the pie actually tasted any good. Hirway is so sweet-natured that it's nearly impossible to offend him. But with this one, I came close.
Right, because I said, look, if you want to share this recipe, which I think you should, because this is the best dessert in the world, this is how you make it. Why are you changing it? But she was like, it's for the New York Times cooking section. I can't say go buy Philly cream cheese and a Keebler crust, and it can't take 10 minutes to make and then set overnight. That's not really cooking. Which I was like, okay, I guess you can do what you want, but you're going to make it probably not as good. That was my assumption.
In the recipe that is on the New York Times, she actually still does do a homemade crust, and there is homemade whipped cream. So it sounds like she kind of did a little mixture. Have you made that version? Do you make that version?
I haven't made that version, but I have had that version. And It's very, very good. But I would say it's different. It's a different iteration. And in the end, it's something that might be really good, but it's different it's not going to have the same exact special qualities of what the original was.
It's hard to not be a snob sometimes. I have the same issue. They're also, though, this surprised me. I'm blanking. What is that place in New York City? It's famous for its banana pudding. It's a bakery. Oh, Magnolia Bakery.
Yeah.
And there's the recipe for their banana pudding on the New York Times site. And it is made with a box of pudding, vanilla pudding.
Yeah.
So they actually do sometimes kind of do the trashy recipes. For the record, that Magnolia Bakery banana pudding recipe with the box of vanilla pudding and the box of Nilla wafers is very good. But back to Rishi's mom's mango pie. It got its first 15 minutes in the New York Times in 2019 in Samin Nosrat's piece titled "A Very American Mango Pie Inspired by Indian Aunties." And then in 2022, it was translated into an ice cream flavor at Salt and Straw, the Portland, Oregon-based chain. Rishi had the Salt and Straw owners on his podcast Partners, cousins Tyler and Kim Malik. They were also on this show, and they were a delight. And after the episode aired, Rishi emailed them pitching the flavor. Turns out they love the idea, and Mom's Mango Pie has been a seasonal November flavor on their Thanksgiving menu ever since. Did you see that? I mean, it was kind of all over the place a couple of years ago where this woman saw a recipe engraved on a headstone and she started searching the country for these. And there's actually like quite a number of people who put a recipe on their headstone. And so obviously that recipe meant a lot to them. And it had me thinking, of course, what would I put on mine? Which also made me think of that commercial from the 90s. Remember that? Like, what will you have on your tombstone? Pepperoni and sausage. Do you remember that?
No.
It was the Tombstone frozen pizzas. You're like a year older than me, so I thought maybe you would know.
Wow. Gosh, no, I don't remember that.
But I'm curious, would your mom have wanted this to be the recipe that she is known for? Or would she have chosen something else if she had the opportunity to pick?
She was an excellent cook. She was very, very good at many, many things. I don't know if she would feel precious about which of her dishes got well known. It had been such a hit at Thanksgiving that I think she was pretty used to people being excited specifically for her mango pie, you know, because it was like this associated with the holiday and so many people were coming over. People would, you know, send messages saying like, I can't wait for Auntie's mango pie, you know. So I think she would be fine with it.
What would yours be?
Oh, gosh. I mean...
Well, this actually, I shouldn't ask you that because my next question is, what is your last meal? And I feel like those two things would overlap. So what would your last meal be / what do you want on your tombstone?
Okay, for my last meal, I don't know if anybody's ever said this to you, but this is a hard decision to make.
No one's ever said it, ever.
For most people, it's like, no problem. But for me...
For you, yes.
For me, it was actually a tough call. I decided I was going to go with pav bhaji.
What is that?
With it?
No.
It's another, you know, specialty from my mom's kitchen that I would request. She would ask me if it were my birthday sometimes, or, you know, just like a special occasion, what do you want? This would be something that I would often ask for because it took some of the most delicious flavors from Indian cooking and also combined it with one of the best elements of Western cooking, which is buttered bread. Instead of eating this bhaji with like rice or with like a chapati or a naan or something like that, you eat it with basically like a mini hamburger roll, toasted and grilled on the pan with butter or ghee on it. Butter is like a big part of this dish, and so it's really, really good. The bhaji itself is just like a mixed vegetable. I mean, bhaji, I think, just means mixed vegetable, but that's really what this is. I think it's quite flexible. There's a lot of tomato and onion, like in so much Indian cooking, and also potatoes. And, you know, I think my mom would make it with cauliflower and peas and carrots. It's a little bit sweet and spicy and savory all at the same time, and mushy. I used to describe it to my friend Matt, who was my best friend growing up, still my friend today, but he would be the one who would always be over at my house eating. And I remember telling him, I was like, it's like Indian sloppy joes, but vegetarian.
Was the tomato element the sauce? Was it like a stewy, saucy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. It's mushy. It really is like a sloppy joe kind of consistency. You would eat it kind of like you would eat Indian food, you know, where you tear off a piece of the bread, you eat it with your hands, but the bread you're eating it with, you know, would be just like a delicious hamburger bun. I would astonish myself with how much I could eat. I had a sense of like sort of what my appetite was. But when my mom would make this, I feel like it tripled. I would just keep going and going and going and going. And so this is really a hack for two reasons. One, I get to have a delicious meal, but also I get to extend my last meal for a pretty long time.
Forever and ever.
Yeah.
What part of India is this from? Because I'm not familiar with that kind of bread in Indian culture.
Yeah. Well, so it's called pav bhaji, and pav means bread, or that's what it means in this case, but it comes from the Portuguese word for bread.
Oh, interesting.
Pav. This dish, I think, is street food from Bombay. My family's Marathi. My mom grew up in the state of Maharashtra, which is the state that Mumbai or Bombay is in. It's kind of like fast food. It has a fast food quality with the bun and all the butter and stuff that's in it. It hits in a very satisfying way, the same way that like fast food does, which is probably also why I loved it.
Your mom was probably thrilled though. You're like shoveling vegetables into your mouth as a teenager. Yeah.
It's really good. And I was so thrilled when I went to London and went to Dishoom for the first time. Everybody has told me like, this is one of the best Indian restaurants in the world. You have to go. And I went, and I was excited to go anyway, and I opened the menu and they had pav bhaji on the menu, which I'd never seen in a restaurant before. Partly because like Marathi food is not really something that's represented in most Indian cuisine. Most of the people who own Indian restaurants, especially in America, aren't from that part of the country. And so that very regional cuisine isn't usually something that you can find unless you go to somebody's house and they're going to make it for you.
How did that compare to your mom's?
It was fantastic. And I had a sort of childhood Proustian moment eating it. I hadn't had it in a long time because before my mom passed away, she wasn't really able to cook for many years. So I hadn't had it in a while. So I couldn't do like an A to B comparison. But in terms of the comparison to my sense memory, it was really spot on.
Wow. That's so rare. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I've been to that restaurant now, I think 3 times since then in the last, 6 years or something like that, 7 years. And every time I'm like, I've got to go and I've got to get that.
Chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want as a part of this last meal? Do you want dessert?
Oh man. I mean, if I can throw in, while we're here sitting at my mom's table, if I can throw in a slice of mango pie as well, or,
of course,
2 slices, because it's really, you can't just have 1 slice, then I would for sure add that on as well.
For his last meal, Hrishikesh Hirway wants pav bhaji and a couple slices of his mom's mango pie. After the break, how late is too late in life to pick up a coffee habit? Before the break, we talked a lot about Hrishikesh's mom's mango pie. Having a piece of pie makes me think of coffee, which makes me think of the fact that you only just started drinking coffee last year. I'm so curious about this because I feel like if you've come this far, why start now?
Yeah. I mean, I avoided coffee for a long time, mainly just because I have a child's palate and the bitterness was just, I didn't like it, and also because my parents didn't drink coffee, they drank tea. So my only experience with coffee for my early interactions with it, I worked at McDonald's. That was my first job when I was 14. And the smell of that coffee just was not appealing to me. It was basically just the smell of burning.
Burnt. Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And then I remember in high school, there were some like cool girls who went to did a semester abroad in France and in Germany and things like that. And then they came back to school and they all drank coffee after that.
And smoked cigarettes.
Yeah. And they went to the cafe off campus, and I, of course, wanted to hang out with the cool girls. And so when I was invited, I was so excited to go. And then I was like, well, I can't show how uncool I am. And so, yeah, of course I'll order a coffee. And I think I remember I had like a mocha because I was like, oh, I can get coffee that has chocolate in it.
Yes.
I'm much more comfortable with the idea of ordering a hot chocolate. But that was kind of it. But I remember being a little scared of the caffeine. I was straight edge in high school and for all the years since. And caffeine felt like something that for me was a potential danger zone because, I was like, oh, then I can stay up all night and I can do my work. And, and I just
It's a slippery slope.
Slippery slope.
Gateway
Exactly.
drug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I stayed away from it. And then on top of that, it was like, well, I don't want to drink coffee anyway because of the taste. But then decades later, I met Lindsay and she loves coffee and she also loves ritual. And so part of her morning ritual is making a nice pot of, drip coffee in like a Chemex. And she's done this for pretty much our entire relationship. And she makes it, from all accounts, a very, very lovely, smooth cup of coffee, not at all like a completely different animal from like the burnt McDonald's thing that I associated coffee with.
I hope so.
Yeah. And she makes her own homemade cashew milk to go with it. It's like a very fancy kind of version of it. But really what tipped the edge. So I knew that this was sort of what the coffee in my house was like. But there was a study in the New York Times that said that they had followed a group of 4,000 nurses since the 70s. And they've been extrapolating to lots of different health data from what they've reported and what they've found. And last summer, there was this article that said that drinking coffee was linked to better aging outcomes. And it was specifically coffee, not tea, not soda. Like the caffeine wasn't enough. It was specifically drinking coffee, multiple times a week. But it was linked with lower incidences of Alzheimer's and other age-related diseases compared to the rest of the group. So I guess it was science is ultimately what tipped the boat for me. I kind of felt like, well, it might not be true, but if it is true, that's a pretty good bet. And the other benefit of it is I get to now partake in this thing that my wife is doing every day anyway. So science and romance really conspired to get me to say like, all right, let me try this. Let's do this together.
Rishi has a Substack newsletter called Accept Cookies. And he recently wrote about his relationship with his dad. His dad's been a guest on a couple of his podcasts, and listeners find him charming and funny. But Rishi says he'd never seen that side of his dad before.
It's funny because with a podcast, you can edit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can present the best version of something. And I do think that in some ways, his appearances on Home Cooking have been the best version of our relationship because I've been able to speak to him in a context where he's an expert and happy to talk about something in depth since he's a food scientist. And especially now that he's retired and doesn't get a lot of opportunity to talk about that stuff. The rest of our interaction, the 99.5 other percent of it doesn't really go that way. Sometimes I've tried to just like make it happen. I'm like, what is it going to take? What is it going to take for us to have a heart-to-heart conversation about something in like with real depth? But those usually haven't gone well. I think that it is just a personality thing. And my whole life, my dad and I, the backbone of our conversations had been about how are you? What's the weather there? This is what the weather is like here. Are you doing okay? Is your health okay? Yep. Okay. Goodbye. Now I'll give it to your mom.
Small talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The smallest of talks.
Tiny talk.
Yeah. And that Cookie Exploder pop-up magazine story was really the first time I tried to dig into that a little bit and say like, what is this? Why is this going on? And so sharing the cookie that I loved with him was a way to, this was before home cooking existed. That was a way for me to say like, hey dad, I really love this. I'm going to tell this story. What do you think about it? And my dad would talk about like the hedonic scale that food scientists use to measure pleasure, as opposed to just telling me like if he liked it or not.
I've never heard of the hedonics. So hedonism, that's so interesting. Yeah. And this is a scientific term?
Yeah. Yeah. This is like when they're, I guess, evaluating foods and they're talking about all its different qualities. One of the ratings that they use is the hedonic scale. And so you can assign a number of like, well, in sample A versus sample B, I found, I'd give this one a 7 on the hedonic scale, this one only a 3 or something like that.
Interesting.
It's like a way to codify how much you liked something.
I just don't see how that can be scientific, though, because it's just personal preference and opinion. Yeah. Maybe that's the one little glitch we found in science so far, the hedonic scale. Yeah. And that was Hrishikesh Hirway's last meal. Rishi's new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. Head to the show notes to find a link to his tour schedule. And if you're here in Seattle, he'll be in conversation on June 7th with my friends Ken Jennings and John Roderick, who I plan to text and try and boss around because I think they need to bring him Seattle's best cookie, the cookie from Met Market. I never use this phrase ever, but if you know, you know. Thanks to Lara MacLean. What's your favorite cookie?
Oh, you know what I really like is a molasses cookie. My partner, she really likes cinnamon chip oatmeal cookies. So that's the one that I will make. And then you have to make sure you can find cinnamon chips. They're very hard to find. At least
I was going to say, I've actually never heard of cinnamon chips.
It's a Hershey's product. And that's what I usually make if I'm going to make cookies.
Your Last Meal is a product of Seattle's Cascade PBS. Go to cascadepbs.org to become a member. And for as little as $7 a month, you'll get on-demand access to all PBS programming. One show you can watch for free at Cascade PBS is my TV show, The Nosh, and today is the season 3 premiere. It's a food and drink storytelling show focused on the Pacific Northwest, and you can watch at cascadepbs.org on YouTube or on Channel 9 at 8:50 p.m. on Thursdays if you're in Western Washington or British Columbia, Canada. We have 8 new episodes of The Nosh, and they're these tasty little 8-minute bites, super easy to binge. This episode was produced by me and senior producer Sarah Bernard, who also mixed and mastered it. Original theme music by Prom Queen. I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal. I'm a pun person like you, so every time Samin chastised you, I'm like, I don't see what the problem is. He's a genius. She just doesn't get it. On that note, really quick, actually, did you know that there is a pun competition that they've been doing in Austin for 49 years, maybe 50 this year? You should go. I competed in this like a decade ago, and it is called the O. Henry Pun-Off.
I went to college for theater and film at Sarah Lawrence College, but also there is a puppetry program at the University of Connecticut. And I went there, you know how most kids will go abroad to England or Italy or something. I went to Connecticut and took as many puppet classes as I could for a full entire year. I stayed the summer too. And that was great.